Before I begin this morning, I want to share with you guys that some sermons have the potential to crush believers more than others. And it was with that in mind that I've solicited help. The pastors, we all often work together, so in a way that's no different. But in particular, this time we did. And as I was going back through the notes that I received from one of your pastors, it reminded me that about 10 years ago, a sermon on the same topic came up. And after Sunday had passed and the following work week came, I went to my pastor with a heavy heart. Do you even remember this? Probably not. You do? You have a better memory than I do, brother. I went to my pastor with a heavy heart and was very open and honest because I knew he loved me. And he gave me the kind of wisdom, the kind of advice that only a pastor can give. And the reason I mention that is because I was loved well at that time, but also I have learned to love in the same way because I've come up and been trained alongside this guy and under this guy. So all that to say this, if today's sermon weighs upon your soul, you should certainly come to your pastors. You are free to come to me or Zach or Ricky, and we would be happy to speak with you in the midst of that, because it's in the midst of such things and in such ways that the Spirit, alive and active, does work among us. When I was young, and this is far, far younger in my life, when I was a teenager, I worshiped in a small country church. And there, the plates, you better believe, they got passed every Sunday. And every Sunday, the same old checks got passed down the line. We knew what color everybody's checks were. But one Sunday, I tell you this, somebody put a giant wad of cash in the plate, and it was like a mafioso had come to worship with us that day. This was not a rich church, so this really stood out. And everybody started wondering, of course, what you're wondering, who was it? They were also wondering if the money had been come by honestly, and if there was any money left to give. That question was key. Sure enough, the wads of cash kept on coming about once a month. But no one could figure out who it was coming from, which is an amazing thing in a small country church. If there's one thing a small country church will not abide by, however, it's a secret. One of the deacons told another one, way to go, deacons. One of the deacons told another one, and then everybody knew. And it turns out this is who it was. It was a recent convert, if you can believe that. It was a recent convert who had started coming to church just because his friends invited him. He was about 20-something. He was very young, and he had learned to trade, and he got paid in cash, and he worked so hard that the people above him had entrusted a business to him. So he had his own business, this guy. He's amazing. He's very successful, and for his age, and really, even for my age, he was very wealthy. And when his jobs got paid, he would sit away from the rest of us. So he would sit like way back in the corner so that when the plates got passed, he could put his money in, and his buddies wouldn't notice. Nobody would notice. Very wise. But when everyone found out who it was, they, of course, tried to reason with him, and they said, dude, you only have to give 10% like everybody else. Like, what are you doing? But he was set on giving half. He was set on giving half of what he made, and this is what he said. I used to give half my money to somebody else. Now I give it to him. You got no idea who he saved me from. Today's sermon is titled, The Disciple Gives. And while following Christ involves many things, today we're going to focus on giving financially. Christian giving is patterned after Abraham's giving in Genesis 14. Everything we do with giving is patterned after this chapter. It gets refined, it gets qualified, it gets expanded on, especially by the coming of Christ, who comes from the heavenly Jerusalem down as our high priest. It all gets qualified, but it all starts right here in Genesis 14. So as we continue to consider the life of Abraham, it is right, and not only right, but it is a good thing that we consider giving this morning. When we think of giving, what do we think of? Do we think of dollars and cents? Do we think of wants and needs and how much they cost? Do we think of having enough? Ever and always having enough? Do we think about the dollars and cents we can spare then after we have thought about all these other things? Do we think about who he saved us from in the midst of all those questions? A war is being fought over us in the heavenly places. Paul tells us this. Your pastors will continue to tell you this. A war is being fought over us in the heavenly places. Rulers and authorities are seeking for ways to take us for themselves. Cosmic powers, spiritual forces of evil are seeking new ways to entice us ever and always. They are so creative. What if money is one of those ways? What if money is more than dollars and cents? What if money is something they use to take our souls away? And what if they're winning? These are the kinds of questions that sneak up on Abraham in Genesis 14. But to understand how he answers these questions, we have to dig in deep to the details of the story. We got to pay really close attention because there's a lot in this story. And I tell you, the devil is in the details, so hold on tight. We pick up where we left off last week. Abraham and Sarah leaving for Egypt. And on their way back from Egypt, Lot and Abraham part ways. Abraham settles further to the west, further into the land of promise, and Lot takes the lands further to the east, but he continues to drift further and further away toward this city that's called Sodom. It's a rich city. It's first rate. It has all the amenities of a Dallas. And that's where he ends up living. Meanwhile, there are 4 kings that come into the land, 4 kings from Mesopotamia. Let me think from your perspective. There's this huge desert, and Abraham's from over here. Anybody that goes across this giant desert has to go around like this. So these kings come from a long way off, and they slowly come around. They travel the same path that Abraham does. And as you might guess, these kings, being from Abraham's old country and not knowing the Lord our God, they come to Canaan, but not for the Lord. They come to pillage cities, to sack them, and to take all the spoils back up over the desert back home. So these kings come from Abraham's old country to his new country to rob and steal and take away. 5 Canaanite kings, 5 kings from Abraham's new country decide to stand up against this bully, and there's a battle. But the home team loses. They lose everything, which means all their stuff from all their cities gets taken, but also all their people get taken. And they're going to get taken back to that old land of Abraham's. Guess what else gets taken? Lot. Lot gets taken. Abraham's relative gets taken among all the spoils. Now, Abraham hears that Lot's been taken by kings from his old country, and he knows what he knows what that means. He knows what's going to happen. He knows that they will take Lot back, that they'll take him back to his old land, that they'll take him back to his old gods, that they'll take him back to the old ways, and there he will be enslaved. And this is unacceptable for Abraham because, just like his forefathers, those kings that are taking Lot are moon worshipers. They worship the moon god, just like Abraham's people did. They worship the moon because it gives them a number of things, including wisdom, prophecy, and progress. But Abraham is starting to learn the truth that it's God himself who made the heavens and the earth. It's God who gives us wisdom and prophecy and progress. It's God who blesses this world, and he will do it through Abraham. So Abraham is learning very quickly that he now knows better than he did before. Abraham knows these kings will drag Lot's soul back to his old God, back where Lot does not want to go. And Abraham knows, he's learning the old life. He's learning what you guys know. The old life, it follows us. It follows us like a lion, seeking to devour us. It follows us to catch us in moments of self-indulgence. The old life follows us to catch us in moments of weakness. It follows us waiting for the perfect moment to take us back where we don't want to go. Abraham sees his old life following him, and he faces it head on, and he gathers 318 men, and under cover of night they raid, and they defeat them all, and they bring back all the riches and all the people. All the riches and all the people that were stolen. He takes them all back. Now, at this point, as readers, we would think that the story is starting to wind down because all the fighting has taken place, right? It was this great action movie, and now we start to calm down and the story starts to wane. But no, I'll tell you, this is the point in the text where things start to get really interesting. Abraham and his men returned to Canaan, to the valley outside of Salem, Jerusalem, which means righteousness and peace, right? The 5 Canaanite kings who lost all their stuff and got their tails beaten by the 4, they come back. They come back to this valley to meet Abraham to try to get back what's theirs. They're going to negotiate for the stuff that they lost, for the people that they lost. But before they can say a word, this king comes out of this city called Salem, and his name is Melchizedek. The king of Salem comes out. Melchizedek comes out to meet Abraham. And he's a king, but you should also know he's a high priest as well. He's both of these things. It's very interesting. He comes out to meet Abraham and Abraham's men, and he serves them bread and he serves them wine in celebration of the most high victory of the Lord over the false gods and the false kings. In other words, Melchizedek comes back and he comes out to serve Abraham and his men a victory meal. It's a celebration. It's a picture of what Christ would come and serve us. For this that sits in front of us here, that's what it is. It's a lot of things, but by and large, it's a victory meal. It's a victory meal that he serves us Sunday after Sunday over sin and death. He serves it to us in the presence of our enemies, that more and more we might participate in his victory over those very enemies. That as we eat here, we participate more and more in his victory over sin and death. So Melchizedek serves them bread and wine, and then he offers them a blessing, and you heard it read. Blessed be Abraham by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hands. Beautiful. In response to his bread and wine, Abraham gives Melchizedek a tenth of the spoils that he took. All those riches that he won by defeating those 4 kings. He brings it all back, and of that giant pile, he gives a tenth to this guy named Melchizedek, which as far as we can tell, he hasn't been in the story before. Abraham didn't know him, as far as we know. What Abraham did know and what we know is that he is a priest of the Most High. And so he gives him a tenth of everything that he took. Abraham gives him a tenth of his spoils because a tenth of his spoils is really most likely what Abraham used to give to the moon god that he worshiped. So he used to give a tenth to the moon god. Now he gives a tenth to this God called the Most High. Abraham gives a tenth to the Most High because of this. He wants all of Canaan to know who brought him victory. He wants to shout out the Most High, is what we would say today. He wants all of Canaan to know that he has victory over the four kings and victory over the moon god as well. Did you see it? It was so subtle. When did Abraham attack them? He did it at night. He did it at night under the very face of the moon god. He attacked those who worshiped the moon god just to spite him, just to spite them. It was under cover of night that Abraham attacks despite his own old god and those who worship him, because he knows it's not the moon god. It's the one that made the moon. That's the God of victories. It is the maker of moons, the maker of men, the God of Abraham. That's what we'll come to call him from this passage. Who do you worship? You worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, in part taken from this passage. Even as Christ brings us victory by coming down from heaven and becoming poor and defeating death, that we might become rich indeed, so Melchizedek comes out of this city and he comes down to the valley to celebrate the victory of the Most High, the maker of moons and the maker of men. Paul tells us that when we tithe, and I'll put tithe in quotation marks because tithe really means a tenth, right? Paul says when we give, or what we say a lot of the time in a church, when we tithe or give, it should look like this. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So for us, it's less about the percentage, according to Paul, and it's more about the heart. The heart matters more than our percentage, and this is why. If we truly love Christ and we give as we love, we will always give enough. Why? Because Christ's love is enough. You see how that works? If we truly love Christ and we give as we love, then what we give will always be enough, because his love is always enough. Abraham gives a tenth to the Most High because he wants all of Canaan to know where his allegiance lies. He wants to let everybody know. And if he could have had like a jersey with the Most High and a shirt or and a hat, he would have worn it, right? He was letting everybody know who he was repping that day. The same thing happens when we give to the worship and work of the church here, by the way. For when we give sacrificially, when we give enough to feel it, and you know what I mean by that. You can spare $1, you could spare this, you can spare that, and not notice. But there are some amounts that when you spare it, you really can't quite spare it, and you definitely notice, right? When we give sacrificially, when we give enough to feel it, we remind ourselves where our true allegiance lies, just like Abraham. And by giving sacrificially to Christ's church, we find ourselves perhaps living more modestly than we would otherwise. And so we remind ourselves in our town, it ain't the almighty dollar that brings me victory. It ain't the almighty dollar. It's the Most High, the King of heaven and earth. That's the one in whom I trust. So the 5 kings come forward ready to make a deal. Bera, the king of Sodom, his name is Bera. Bera of Sodom offers Abraham all the spoils in his negotiation. That's his tactic. Bera's going to give Abraham this giant pile of riches, as long as Abraham gives him all the people. Abraham can have all of the wealth, but Bera wants all the people. That's his offer. So he offers Abraham all the wealth, which is the 90% that's remaining after Abraham gave 10. He doesn't want money. He doesn't want money. He wants souls. He wants people. Isn't that interesting? Bera, king of Sodom. His name means burning evil. Or what I like even better is evil that will burn. That's what his name means. If Melchizedek is a king of righteous peace, then he certainly represents Christ. Who then does Bera represent? Burning evil or evil that will burn? Bera represents Satan. So then notice Satan's strategy and Bera's strategy. Satan doesn't want money. He wants souls. He will give money. That's what Bera's doing. He's giving money for souls. That's part of the satanic strategy, to trade money for souls. That's what happens. He's willing to buy souls with money, as many as he can get. Notice this too. Notice how he tries to sway Abraham and take him away from his prior commitment. He offers Abraham all the wealth, the remaining 90%, that Abraham would be what? Really, really rich. That he would have lots and lots of money. But if you have lots and lots of money, way more than you need, then you stand to become greedy. And if you stand to become greedy, maybe that 10% you gave to the Lord is too much now. Maybe you should stop giving 10% to the Lord. Maybe you should take it back. Maybe you should give 7. Maybe you should give 2. Maybe you should give 1. Maybe you should give none. That's his strategy with Abraham. In other words, like somebody else said in the New Testament, all these things I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. Melchizedek may have gotten to Abraham first, but Bera would have the last word in the hopes of undermining Abraham's trust in the Lord. You see, it's a long con. It's a long game. But it's a game that Satan is willing to play. It's a game that he plays with us all the time in the West. And in many ways, this is perhaps the story, the history of the church in the West, especially in our lifetime. The trend in the West is to give less and less money to the worship and work of the Lord. And the trend is decades old. It's not one that we're waiting to decide on. The historians have weighed in. The studies have come out. If anything, we're looking to see what happens next. But as it stands, from the 50s, we can look back and see the American church received 70% of all charitable giving. Can you imagine? 70%. Now the percentage is down to 27%, and it's falling. And the percentage each family is given and continues to give, it decreases at roughly the same rate. So in the 50s, families used to give about 7%, which is a tenth of that 70 number I gave before you, that 70%, right? As you might expect, today the average is about 2%, right around that 27% I just gave you of all charitable contributions. So you can see how those numbers, there's a correlation there, what we would say. What we give now is an average around 2%, which should make us wonder, who is the American church really serving? Who is the American church really loving in light of Abraham's story? In the meantime, we become a wealthier country. So we've become wealthier since then, but we've also become more stingy. Does that remind you of anyone? That's exactly what Bera wanted. That's exactly what Bera wanted for Abraham. He wanted to make Abraham rich so that he would give less to the Lord, so that he would become stingy. The American church lives a lot more like Lot than it does Abraham. Like Lot, the American church likes to claim covenant status as a beloved child of the Most High. Meanwhile, what happens to Lot? Lot drifts further this way, further and further east, till he makes his way to Sodom. And there he would stay if no one had taken him. And in fact, after this story, where does he go? He goes back to Sodom. Sodom was known for its depravity, and that's mostly what we remember when we think of the word Sodom. That burning evil, an evil that burns, and there's a lot in that phrase. But I want you to know what Ezekiel tells us is true, that the root of Sodom's depravity was not depravity. That wasn't it. Ezekiel the prophet tells us it was greed and it was wealth. That's what led to Sodom's downfall, not depravity. For it was greed that kept Sodom from loving one another, and in the lack of loving one another and wealth, which gives you leisure, freedom, time to pursue what you like, they began to do things that was not loving toward one another. And that's how Sodom became Sodom. It was greed and wealth and plenty of time to pursue vices that were not loving. Does that sound like the American church you know? But enough of that. Let's worry about our own church, because that's what we're here to talk about and to today. Obviously, we don't want to end up like Lot, drifting towards Sodom. But are we willing to do what Paul says in the epistles? Not to set our hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything. Are we willing? Are we willing to reassess our giving to make sure that we're still giving sacrificially and not easily? Yes, we give to the worship and work of the church. We give to our renovation and we give to missions. But are we willing to resist the lure of Sodom with all its wealth, ease, and pleasure? Are we willing to live more like Abraham and less like Lot? If we live like Abraham, we do it by giving like Abraham. Abraham doesn't wait to give to God. Did you notice that? As far as we know in the text, he gets to town, he's met by this high priest, and he doesn't wait. He gives. He has a meal, and he's blessed, and the Most High is blessed, and he gives. Abraham doesn't wait to give last. He gives first. Abraham gives his allegiance to the Most High before evil can tempt him away. And because he gives to the God of all creation first, do you see what happens? Evil has no claim on him. He says, "Far be it from me to take your wealth, because then you'll be able to turn around and so will all Canaan." They'll be able to turn around and say, "Who made me rich?" They'll be able to turn around and challenge the victories in my life by attributing them to the king of Sodom, to burning evil. No, I've already given, I've already placed my allegiance. I've given it and I can't take it back. No. And because he gives to God first, evil has no claim on him. Yes, evil will tempt us after we give to God first. But here's the thing, if we give sacrificially, we won't have the heart or the money to run out and give it to something else. We won't have the money or the heart to ruin the costly gift that we've given to the Lord. For who would return an expensive gift for a cheap and easy gift? So too those who give first to God are less likely to stray from him. We live like Abraham by giving like Abraham, and Abraham gives so generously. Do you know why? He gives so generously because he knows there are kings and gods and demons after him. He gives because he knows that all those beings are fighting over him. Do you know that? Do you know that? Do you know that kings and gods and demons are fighting over you? And do you give accordingly, even as Abraham does? Abraham knows they will use everything, including money, to defeat him. So he uses his money to remind himself. He reminds himself that the money isn't his. Just like the victory. The victory is not his either. But he takes the money and he gives it away. He gives it away to remind himself that all things belong to God and that God will give him what he needs. And by the way, he knows God will give him what he needs because he just had a meal come out of nowhere that met his needs and the needs of his men. Sight unseen. Abraham gives not to the one who would give him wealth, pleasure, and pride. He does not give to Bera. Abraham gives to Melchizedek, the priest of the Most High, the one who would come down from the holy city to serve him a victor's meal in the midst of his enemies, that he too might participate in the victory of the Most High. That's what he does. So too Christ comes down from the heavenly Jerusalem to serve his people a victory meal in the midst of his enemies. Christ does the same thing. And as we come to the table of our high priest, and as he does that in our midst this morning, as we come to participate in the victory of the Most High, we should ask ourselves, we should ask, remembering who serves us here, do we know who our King is? Do we know where our allegiance truly lies? Do we remember who he saved us from? Let us pray. O Lord, we are the rich in this present age, so let us not be proud. Let us not set our hopes on the uncertainties of what we have. Instead, let us set our hopes on you, for you richly provide us with everything we need. Let us do good, to be rich in good works, to support the worship and work of Christ's church, to be generous and ready to share, to store up treasure for ourselves and a good foundation for the future, that we may take hold of Christ, who is life himself. Amen.